Before we get started, I want to share one of my favorite time-saving tools, Descript. I use it to transcribe interviews, generate podcast show notes, create short video clips, and record easy-to-follow tutorials for my clients. It's also an incredibly helpful tool for grad students and busy professionals. You can use it to take notes on readings, prep for presentations, and make your work more accessible with captions and transcripts. If you're looking for a more efficient way to manage your workload, check out my affiliate link in the show notes. Welcome to the award-winning Grad School Femtoring podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on inclusive grad school stories and learn about personal development and productivity tips. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, a certified coach, consultant, and author, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with insider knowledge to help you reach your personal and professional goals. Back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, we are talking about all things communication and owning your story, two topics I very much love and appreciate. And today's guest is Rhonda Kahn, a speaker, coach, and consultant who specializes in amplifying the unique voices of leaders and teams. As founder of Simply Speech Solutions, Rhonda empowers individuals and organizations to overcome fear, own their presence, and communicate with power and intention. Drawing from her background as a former actor and speech-language pathologist, she brings a holistic approach that has helped clients secure high-profile speaking engagements, advance into leadership roles, promote best-selling books, and establish themselves as thought leaders. Oh, I love this. I'm so thrilled to have Rhonda on the show today. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait.
Yes. I just reading your bio. I get excited. There's some overlaps, and also just in general, I think the work that you do is so amazing, and I'm so glad that you were willing to come on the show to share some of that wealth with us today. So for folks who are new to your work, one of the things that I think is important, at least for our show, is to showcase stories in addition to the knowledge so that folks can have some background and context. And also sometimes they might see themselves in realizing, oh, I'm not the only one that has these set of whatever it is, identity markers, struggles, achievement, you name it. So for you, I would love to hear more about anything you're comfortable sharing in terms of your background, maybe your higher ed journey, or even how you got to where you are today as a public speaking coach and trainer.
Okay, of course. So it was a road that continues to wind. It's how I got here. I majored in speech and hearing science in college to be a speech language pathologist. I came from a family of teachers, and I enjoyed the idea of teaching, but I knew that I didn't want that as my path. And so I was going through all these fields. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for a very long time, and I realized I just wanted the drama of it all. I didn't want any of that paperwork, any of that. And so one of my teacher aunts was like, why don't you look into this field called speech language pathology? And I was like, okay, this sounds really great. Helping people communicate who have, delays or disabilities. This sounds great. And so I majored in it, graduated with my bachelor's from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And to be a certified speech language pathologist, you have to have a master's degree. And there's also like clinical hours and so on and so forth. And so I got my master's right after. I just went straight through. And it's interesting because midway through, and I think I'd always acted extracurricularly, like, high school plays and any non-major class that I could take as an acting non-major I took in undergrad. And I even thought about getting my master's in theater. And my mom, who comes from a different generation, was like, I highly support you, but I think this is going to be a different trajectory for you, and blah, blah, blah. And she talked me away. And so I ended up getting my master's. And I, was very happy that I did that. But as soon as I started working as a speech pathologist, I was also in a play in the evening. And so they've always kind of gone together where I was an actor and a speech therapist. And then probably 2 or 3 years into my professional career, I left being a speech pathologist and began to do full-time acting work. And that kind of evolved from there. And so I took turns with that, back and forth, back and forth. The industry was difficult for me because I don't like rejection, and that is acting auditioning a lot. And so, I took pauses, and in one of those pauses, I created a one-woman show that reinvigorated my life. And when I did that, it just changed everything. I was able to take control over it, and I was performing, and it's so funny because it kind of creates a foundation for what I do now. When I had my son, however, in 2016, and there's a longer story for this, but I ended up on bed rest and I lost a lot of my work because I was doing a number of things. I was acting, I was doing corporate speech therapy for a firm in Manhattan. I was doing early intervention therapy for children with developmental delays, and I had to halt everything when I had my son, and my husband and I were paying very expensive Brooklyn rent. And we were like, okay, maybe I should stay home for a little bit and we'll figure our things out because I had lost some work. We weren't as Zoom savvy as now. And in that moment, that's when I decided to start a business when I was nursing a 6-month-old, because I was like, hey, I'm home. What if I combine being a speech therapist, being an actor, being a public speaker all my life to create a business? And it started with me just Googling things about how to start a website. What could this be? And then 8 years later, I have a company that I work with many one-on-one clients. I've worked with multiple companies. I've had my own podcast. And so, like I said, the road has continued to wind, but I've continued to say yes in every part of this journey.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your backstory, because what I'm hearing is that you were willing to make a lot of pivots, that you've had this strong interest in theater for a while. It sounds like since high school, perhaps even earlier. And then you realize, well, maybe it might not make sense financially to pursue a career in theater. So I'm going to go the SLP route. And then you still continue to do the theater. And having this huge life change, which is motherhood. It's so transformational, that helped you to then make another big pivot, which is to how do you bring those two worlds together? And that brings us to what you do today with your coaching, with your consulting work, and with supporting people and strengthening their communication skills and their public speaking. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And it's funny because it all still connects with being able to tell stories, speak to people, and create an impact with single thing I do. So,
And that's actually what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the importance of storytelling and the importance of owning your story. And not everyone is able to articulate their story so clearly and to find their strengths and then to use them to then ultimately build a career for themselves. I would love to start there with this idea of owning your story. I want to hear more about what that means to you, and also what that could mean to those of us that, a lot of my audience members are first gen, they're BIPOC, they're non-traditional, so they might be older, returning to school. They hold a lot of intersectional identities. And sometimes they don't feel safe enough in the spaces that they're part of to share some big components of their identities or of their story. So, we can start with, what does owning your story mean? And then kind of dive into what it might mean for other folks too.
yeah, owning your story is having a level of self-awareness and acceptance of all the parts of you that brought you to where you are today. Right. And so obviously that means, your racial, cultural identity, possibly nationality. It could also mean ability. It could also mean the type of family you came from, your socioeconomic status. It's also parts of your personality, your life experiences, all of those things. And whether you felt like they served you or they were challenging, all of those parts have brought you here. They make you who you are. And so it's acknowledging that they are essential for you. And I think getting there takes a lot of self-awareness of like, okay, what are the bones of me? You know, what do people say about me? What makes me show up in this way? Because when we speak, all of those parts are there. All of those parts are there. So for instance, let's take myself. I'm an African American, Black American woman from Chicago, from the South Side of Chicago. I'm 43. Sorry, 43. So I'm getting used to it. I'm getting
The
used to it, but I'm
side.
happy to be here. The side, did you see the side? But I'm 43, so I was born in the early 80s, and I'm on that cusp, what we call us Zennials, early millennial, and like not early, late elder millennials,
Yeah.
geriatric, whatever they're saying. And so I have a particular perspective on things. I'm an only child. I have parents who are retired postal workers who, didn't finish school. And so those are parts of me. And also, I have ADHD. I am a mom. I have 2 boys, all of those kinds of things. I'm tired most of the time. Those kinds of things are I just brainstorm that in like several seconds. But if you can take a minute and sit down and go deeper and just really think like all of these parts that make me me. Now, to the second part of what you're saying, we may not always feel safe. We being, non-white folks who didn't finish school, or folks whose parents didn't finish school, or may have immigrated to the country, or may have, whatever these levels. And the first thing I like to say about that is like, that is not your fault. That lack of safety is not your fault. You don't have to conform to a space. And I know we sometimes know that intellectually, but for survival and for just safety, sometimes we naturally will fall into patterns, and that's not a bad thing. I don't want people to shame like, oh, I'm code switching or none of that, because there are reasons that people have fallen into that. But my, I guess, armor or ammunition against that kind of behavior is to be intentional. And that is to have that self-awareness of all of those parts, like I just said, and determining what parts of me are necessary to bring forward in this situation. What are these pieces that are important? What's important to share? What's important to know? And it's less about, I need to be 100% me every single place. Not every single place even deserves 100% of you. If we're being 100% honest, it's not about hiding or masking. It's just like, they don't get that privilege or right sometimes. But also, are there parts of me that are necessary for people to know? Is me sharing this, or is me showing up in this way? Is me making sure that I don't code switch, or I let my accent be heard, or I code switch out real quick to let you know it's not a gang, like, never forget I'm from Chicago. Like, sometimes I tell people that when they want to try me, even though I get mad at stereotypes about Chicago. Also that, all of those kinds of things, because sometimes that can disarm someone else, and that can open up so many more doors for you and other people. So that's what I would say to that.
Oh my gosh, so much came up. The first thing, I love that you said, not everybody deserves to access all of
No,
you.
man.
I love that. Another thing is, because I am familiar with you, your work, we follow each other, we've been in touch. I love that you make this distinction in at least what I've seen from social media about the difference between authenticity and intentionality. And I think that is a really important distinction that you're making of, it's important to be intentional with what we share, who we share, what about us. And you can still show up as yourself and own your story, but you can do it in an intentional way based on where you're at, your level of physical, psychological safety, etc. And it reminds me, for me in my work, of the difference between vulnerability versus intimacy. Because when I first started my work, Grad School Femtoring, I like to tell people that I'm an open book, and I do share a lot about my own backstory too when I do my talks and public speaking. But I always remind myself that not everybody gets access to my intimacy. So I don't share things like images of my children or my family. I don't share my day-to-day. You will rarely see a day in the life video. made by me, because to me that's very intimate, and there's a difference between me being vulnerable and being able to share the things that I have that have may perhaps become scars versus sharing the things that are open wounds. So in any case, I appreciate you making that distinction and really being clear about what's important here in you owning your story is owning your full self and then knowing when and who gets access to these parts of your story and being intentional about that. So, wow. I want to transition us to talking about how folks can start to identify the unique or very particular parts of their story. And I know we've already started talking about this, like certain spaces, especially quote unquote professional spaces, which is just another term for white supremacist spaces. Like a lot of students don't feel safe in showing up as their full selves, or they don't feel embraced, or they don't feel affirmed. And so in this case, I'm thinking about students and even early career professionals who are still trying to figure themselves out. What insights can you offer them about figuring that out, that process of getting started, of figuring out, well, what about me makes me me, and also how can I start to identify, craft my story?
Yeah, so I would start with facts, right? Facts, age, where you're from, what you like, who your parents are, things about your ability, all those like basic facts. I'm tall, I'm short, I'm blah blah blah. And then go into adjective, how you would describe, like adjectives you would use to describe yourself, adjectives you've heard about yourself from other people, and then things that you are good at, right? Things that you think you're good, and not just directed to your academic work, but I'm a really good listener. I make puns. And then, all kinds of, and then maybe things that you may not love, but are also really important. Sometimes I get lost in my words, and I forget my point, and I'm not great at being organized, or whatever it is. But all of those things, like, really, really think about. And if you have difficulty, find someone you trust, a trusted friend or family member that you feel safe with, if you have that, and ask for feedback. And that's an exercise I actually have my clients do sometimes, where I'll say, if they're having trouble, I'm like, who do you trust? It's like my sister or my best friend. Okay. Ask them what they think about you, and what they know about and what they recognize, because sometimes we just need that mirror of trust for other people to really start doing that work. And so once you get that inventory of all those things, really look at it and really think about, like, wow, you might be surprised at all the elements that make you you. And then I think the next point to do that is just, where do these parts need to be activated, and how? How will you go about this, knowing these parts of your story? I can speak about what I wish would have happened when I was if it's okay, in graduate school.
Yes, definitely.
So speech language pathology, maybe it's changed in 20 years, 20, 25 years, but it's always been a very white, woman dominated field. One of my best friends and I went to undergrad and grad. We became friends through that because I saw another Black woman in speech in my class. I was like, hey, you're going to be my friend. Cool, we're friends. So we're still very close to this day. And we ended up going to graduate school together and did research programs together. But it was very, very limited. And this is also, like, think early 2000s, and think kind of where we were. I was at a predominantly white university in the Midwest. Granted, it was a very popular school. There was diversity there, but we didn't call things microaggressions then, even though there was a term for it. We weren't able to point out. And, like, even if we had, like, different diversity programs on campus, when you went to class, there was just us. And there were tons and tons of things that I experienced, and we're talking about language. And, I had one Black professor mentor, but we had very, very few we had some faculty of color, but not a whole lot. And it felt very, very, marginalizing, and it felt like, I think we didn't, I think the natural, like, how do I show up? It was kind of like this space of, how do I show up? Do I code switch? Do I even know? We didn't even use that term then as much, but I'm having to present, the white girls all clicked up because, and it was a very kind of interesting dynamic that was in place. And so what I wished is that, I ended up, by the way, being the graduate speaker for our luncheon, which was great. But I wish that I had known that, your unique, like, Black girl experience in this space is valuable. Your experience, who you didn't have parents from, you know, middle class or affluent suburbs of Illinois. You lived, middle working class. I don't know where we really fit. It's hard to tell. You did, you had undiagnosed ADHD, but still thrived in graduate school. Like, I wish that I embraced those things and really leaned forward into my strengths of being a good speaker and a good presenter. And I did, but there were many times where I felt like I didn't belong and I shouldn't, and I like, where do I fit? And sometimes, it was really hard for me. And, thankfully I had my good friend. And so I think now I would say for graduate students, early career people, to really be like, you do belong because you're there. And you can lean into those particular strengths, and you can show your culture and show your way of being, despite what's happening. And it will be a strength to you in the long run. And that's what I wish I had.
Right, right. I definitely resonate with what you shared. I think a lot of us will probably resonate with what you just shared of being either the only or one of few, and not being for our lived experiences and all that we bring to the room or the table. And actually, what's interesting too is I wasn't sure if you were going to go there. You mentioned about having ADHD, and I work with a lot of folks who are neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that comes up a lot as a common struggle is communicating. So communicating
Mm-hmm.
with their supervisors, communicating with their advisors, not knowing, like, I'm being misinterpreted, or not being able to advocate for their needs because of concern, ableism, etc. And so I want to hear more about, let's assume that our listener takes us at our word and starts to think, okay, my story, where I come from, all that is me is valuable, but I'm still a grad student, but I'm still in the, work environment where I have many people above me, and they want to start practicing the art of communicating intentionally. What can that look like, or is there a way that they can reframe the way that they communicate? Like, any insights you can just offer about making that decision to communicate more intentionally and actually starting to act on that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're asking, making a decision to communicate intentionally and starting to act forward. And so if you are speaking to, your advisor or those kinds of people, first of all, it's acknowledging that your words are valuable, your experience is valuable. And even if you don't know how to craft that message, you still deserve that time and space with that person. They need to listen to you. And I think, like, that's like before we even figure out what to do. Second is remembering that communication is connection. Speaking is connection. It's about exchange, and it's about making an impact on your audience, whether you're doing a big talk or you're just having a conversation. And so you want to have your audience in mind, and you want to have a plan of, like, okay, in this exchange, what do I want them to do? What do I want them to feel? What is the goal of this conversation, and what should we be walking away with? And sometimes that takes a level of preparation and thought ahead of time. And so it's really thinking through, like, at the end of this conversation, I want this person to, and this should be about how they are transformed, not just what you want and need, because otherwise then we start focusing so much more on ourselves and not on what it should be. And then you think about, okay, what are the necessary parts of what I can share and offer that need to be able to get them to do this thing? Do I need to be direct? Do I need to be enthusiastic? Do I need to excite them? Do I need to awaken them? Do I need to alarm them? Is it important? Is urgency? And then you potentially want to just prepare what you're going to say based on that. And so maybe you take notes. You don't have to take notes, but I recommend you just jot a couple of things down. Maybe you talk it through. Some of us, I spoke about ADHD, are kind of verbal processors. I'm definitely in that space. And I learned this from a good colleague of mine who is a specialist in neurodiversity, Margot Jaffe, where, you want to prepare if you're talking to leadership so they know the intention behind what you're saying. So instead of just like kind of word dumping at them, just have a plan of like, here are some things I want to make sure that we get to talk about. It doesn't have to be formal. And by the way, I'm a spontaneity, be in the moment person, but I believe the structure gives you freedom 100%. And then you speak, you go and talk to them. And you can continue if you're a person that likes, shout out to my type A folks who love to assess and love to know. I know y'all are listening. I know y'all are here. Y'all wouldn't even be in academia if y'all weren't. So there's a lot of my clients, by the way. And so, if you want to assess, you make some notes like what worked, what didn't work, and what am I going to do for next time? And I think the more you do it, the better you will be, because you will be more comfortable and things will be more natural. And maybe at that point you can start to skip steps because maybe you'll be planning some of those steps in your brain, and it'll become more natural and comfortable for you as you go along. But it's deciding that your words matter and that you deserve the space with that person, making a plan and seeing how you're going to impact them.
If you're navigating grad school or supporting students who are, I want to take a moment to share something I've designed with you in mind. I offer interactive, culturally responsive workshops on grad school admissions and sustainable productivity, created specifically for first-gen, BIPOC, low-income, neurodivergent, and non-traditional students. These sessions go beyond the basics. I cover topics like writing compelling personal statements, securing funding, overcoming burnout, and building productivity systems that actually work for your brain, body, and circumstances. If you're a student, consider passing this along to your program director. And if you're a program coordinator or advisor or director listening in, I understand the constraints you're facing because I've been there as a former program director myself. That's why I partner with institutions of all sizes and work flexibly within your budget. You can learn more at gradschoolfemtoring.com/speaking or view my sample videos and testimonials on my Talkadot speaker profile. We can close the hidden curriculum gap together, one workshop at a time. I love that you said that, how did you say it? That structure gives you freedom. I was going to say offers freedom, but gives you freedom. Yes, structure gives you freedom. I love that you said that. And what also stands out to me is about, again, the intentionality piece. You're thinking about who you're talking to. So who is your audience? And this, when I think of audience, I think about the theater background too. So who is your audience? Have them in mind, and then do some planning. Doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, I am very type A, and I do love me some structure. But you'd be surprised, it actually doesn't take that much time to do some preparing, even if I've got 3 bullet points and I want to make sure that I get those 3 bullet points out, or I've got like 2 main questions I want to ask this person, and I want to make sure I get those questions out. And everything else, whatever happens, happens, but you're going to address those 2 things. Just having that structure can be really, really helpful. And even if that means taking an extra 10 to 15 minutes before a meeting or a call to think through, what is it that I actually want to accomplish here? That can make a big difference. And the other thing too, this talking about communicating more intentionally, it also ties to what you also talk about in terms of communicating with power. And so I'm curious about that distinction, perhaps. Like, is there a difference between communicating intentionally versus communicating with power? And when I think about the word power, to me, it sounds more, again, just connotations. It sounds more forceful And I think about
Oh
my
man.
folks who are like, but I value humility, or I was taught to be, humble, or to be a people pleaser, or to, you name it. I come from a collectivist culture. And so it feels almost wrong to try to assert yourself or communicate with power in certain settings, especially when there's a power differential there and there's someone above them that they're talking to. That's usually that with I've noticed, at least with the people that I work with and talk to, that's the biggest struggle is communicating not with their peers, is communicating with the folks levels above them professionally. So again, yeah, I kind of want to transition to this. What's the difference between communicating intentionally and communicating powerfully? Perhaps they are two in the same, but yeah, just anything that comes up as we talk about, yeah, communicating powerfully now.
Yeah, I think they are deeply related, if not a part of the same conversation, just kind of taking it to a different level. And I'm so glad you brought up like how that word power can have multiple connotations for different people and collectivist cultures. I will say a good, I don't know, 95 to 99% of my clients are women of color. And a lot of people, depending on the culture, I mean, I have a huge amount of Black women, the amount of Latinas, Asia, other, and a lot of people come from, I would say, immigrant backgrounds, and the collectivist culture kind of, depending on the culture too, because there's different levels of how that impacts them, but like not being braggy or not being too showy, or the amount of space that you're supposed to take taken up, and like adding gender and different dynamics into the space and how you address authority. And I think that's so important to come up. And this is also a part of like the intentional work of like, how do you usually present? Like, does it make you nervous to address an elder in a certain way, or does it make you nervous to address a man, or does it make you not even nervous, but is there a level of discomfort in that? And if there is, then how do we navigate past that, or how do we navigate through that? And I think the intentional process that I have, and which is a more detailed process if you work with me. I have a whole triangle. Yes, it definitely derives from acting. I'm glad you brought it up. That whole process really gets you out of, how do I do this and how am I impacting this audience? Because when you're audience focused and you're trying to make a transformation, less of that becomes important and more of how I can get this thing to happen it becomes the focus. So what I will say is that the power part is how you take that agency or that ownership back. And it's less about how they're perceiving you and more of how you can not really control, but how you can lead this conversation in a way that makes you feel comfortable. And so it doesn't mean that you transform into a faux assertive or aggressive person if that's not your personality, because that will not serve you. We don't imitate, but are there parts of you that need to come forward again? Because there's a part of you that will be direct, even if that's not your natural way with an elder or somebody else. There's a part of you that can be urgent. There's a part of you that can, and not just necessarily those kinds of verbs, but it's like, do you feel comfortable, you know, being excited and showing joy around somebody who can be like, kind of, straight face kind of person, because that's a part of you. And so that's what I say is that the power comes from. It's just like you being able to have the power to decide and really leaning into that, because your communication improves, tenfold when you do that process.
Right, right. And so what I heard you say, part of what I heard you say is that when you communicate with power, it's about taking the agency back when you are communicating with others. And also, it's not just about that, but it's about being clear about the outcome that you want from whatever engagement that you have, and prioritizing that over what other people's perceptions are. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking about an example of like someone, let's say They want to ask for workplace accommodations or
Mhm.
accommodations in a classroom setting, but they're worried that the professors or the supervisor is going to think that they are taking the easy way out or being quote unquote
Mhm.
lazy, which I don't believe in laziness, just FYI. But that comes up. And I'm thinking, well, how would you communicate with power in that setting? You know, the
Mhm.
outcome is I know that I absolutely need these accommodations to thrive. And no matter what this person's reaction is, if I get the outcome that I want, then I will have communicated successfully according to how you define success, powerfully, intentionally, you name it. That's what came up for me as you were talking about that. So they work hand in hand, being powerful in the way that you communicate and also being intentional in the way that you communicate. You lean on your framework of communicating intentionally to get to that power piece of taking agency.
Yeah.
I still want to get to the execution piece. So I still want,
Let's
yeah,
go.
because at least for
Mhm.
me, as someone who's also neurodivergent, I can understand concepts well, but the hiccup is always how do I do it? It's the how. And so
Mm.
I know you're a former actor, just like me. And I'm curious if you have any tips, techniques, strategies for especially the nerves, like managing
Mhm.
nerves, managing the discomfort that you mentioned earlier. How do you stay present, especially if you have a set, goal in mind, you've got your structure, etc. Maybe you're like, I thought I was going to get this, but I can't even pull up my notes right now. It's not the right time. So if you're in a high stake scenario, and that can mean a number of things. That could mean public speaking on the stage. That could mean you're in an interview for a job you absolutely need to survive. That could mean having a difficult meeting with someone to advocate for what you need. So high stakes. What techniques or strategies can you offer to folks who, again, they're like, I want to assert myself or I want to take agency in this setting?
Yeah, great question. So let's start with the inside work. The way I work is always inside out because I can teach you all the tips and tools. But if you don't do your I belong in this room, I deserve this conversation, my voice matters work, then the techniques all work. So the first step is to do that ownership piece about yourself that we talked about earlier. The next is to, if there are nerves present, really understand what happens to you specifically when you get nervous. Like what's going on for you? Is it the physiological symptoms? Is it, stomach doing all the things? Is it sweating? Is it dry mouth? Is it wiggling, fidgeting? Is it rambling on and on and on and on? Because you're nervous. This is what I used to do. We spoke about acting. When I was nervous at audition, I'd be just yapping it up with everybody. I know I got on everybody's nerves. That's how I worked it out, right? And you're obviously like, don't talk to me. Don't you talk to me.
For
Don't
talk to me, leave me alone.
I respect it. I respect it. I feel like we're on, we represent neurodivergence in like different ways, right? But yeah. And I, because I was just like, I got to get this energy out. But whatever it is for you that shows up, no one is coming and don't try to push it away right away. And I think that's a big misconception that people are like, I'm nervous, so let me just stop. And so what happens is you're trying to contain a volcano, and that's not this is literally not going to work. Acknowledge what's happening. My stomach is hurting because I'm anxious, and this is a big deal to me to talk to this person, or I'm delivering this major lecture for the first time, or this presentation, whatever it may be. I'm doing my, this is the dissertation I've been waiting for, all whatever it may be. It means something to you. When you acknowledge your anxiety and label exactly what's happening, a lot of that anxiety kind of starts to dissipate. The second piece is if it's physiological, you have to get in touch with your breath. Breath is life. As authors, I know we they had us in that breath. They had us,
Yes,
what was
the
it, Rick
exercises.
Letter and all those
Yes.
kinds of things. Yeah. But you can do a simple square or box breathing, which is inhale for 4 seconds, hold, exhale for 4 seconds, hold, and then repeat just to get back into your body. And nobody has to know you're doing any of this. And the next piece I would say is to start to reframe what this is, because you're probably telling yourself some not great things. We all do it. And you may not believe it. And I know it sounds woo, like, okay, yeah, affirm myself, I'm freaking out. But if you get into practice about it, of just being like, I am qualified to be here. I got into this school, for instance, or I got this position for a reason. Just start to reframe whatever negative talk is happening. Nobody is listening. People are listening and they want to hear it. I have value to add. Create that practice within yourself for navigating those nerves. And then I think that over time, just know that the nerves will be there, but they mean something. That means that you care. And that's not a bad thing. And you can channel that into positive energy, and you can channel that to momentum and all of that. But you just have to start taking care of yourself and practicing. And obviously, this is the last thing, and we've talked about this already, but preparation can support a lot of that. Sometimes over preparation can get us in some trouble. Perfectionists, where y'all at? I know you're here, you're listening, and not to say this bad, but when you're prepared, that's going to naturally make you feel better about what you're doing.
Love that. Love that. Well, I mean, I'm like, am I going to really try to challenge my working memory and remember every single step that you shared? But what
Put in the notes.
No, I always want to share what resonates and what stands out and what comes up. And so I love that you shared the many different steps, but it sounds like it's really important to do that reflective mindset work of owning who you are, owning that you have this opportunity for a reason, and then really understanding your body. So your body's sensations. And by the way, I want to mention this. I actually have a emotion sensation wheel. And I know that not everybody will get to see this because I don't release the video. But if you Google emotion sensation wheel, you can then see the wheel where your emotions might lead to what type of sensations you feel. And this is work that I've been doing with myself as well, because as someone with chronic illnesses, I feel all kinds of things. And it helps. It helps a lot to be able to identify what you're feeling and then to come up with ways to help you to manage whatever you are feeling sensationally, what you're feeling actually in the body. So I love that you mentioned that, and even taking control of what you can do in any moment, no matter what happens, no matter how you're feeling, you always have your breath. And I love that. And then also you mentioned that just because you're nervous, or maybe you're feeling anxious or tense, you name it, those feelings are there because you care, and they're not necessarily a bad thing. So that's a great reframe too, that stress and anxiety aren't always a bad thing, that they show that we care, and they can be used as a catalyst for us to do the things that we want to do that are important to us. So that anxiety or that stress could lead to you preparing, like you said. And with preparing, then you feel more confident, and then you do a good job at whatever you're doing. So in any case, yeah, it's a multi-step process, and I would say it's very personalized, that you have to come up with your own system of what works for you, and really slowing down and realizing what comes up for me. I'm the person with the tummy aches, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's like, just figure out what is the thing that comes up for you, and come up with your own system. And before you know it, yeah, you will be, who knows what you will be doing. I was going to say you will be communicating more effectively and more powerfully, but you could do that in any field, in any profession, which is why this is such a crucial skill to work on and to develop. As we get close to time, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to ask you if there was any question that you were hoping that I would ask you.
Yeah, I have a tiny soapbox, if you will allow.
Yes.
No. So what I love about the work that you do is you are supporting people into higher education, and you're supporting them with the tools and the skills that they need to thrive in there and beyond. And a lot of the clients that I work with are very educated, whether or not they're choosing the PhD route or master's or whatever it is, and they are high achievers, and they are sometimes perfectionists, and I've worked with many academics, and I know everybody who goes to grad school doesn't want to continue to follow that path. But what I am finding with many professional people is that sometimes their identity tends to be wrapped up in whatever that career path is. And I want to say that it's a part of it, but not the whole thing. And you can show up however you need to show up at that moment. You can be intentional. Where this shows up with speaking, practically, so I can always tell, well, they tell me, I know this, but my clients who come from academia definitely have an academic style of speaking. And what you're smiling when I say that, it's just like, I can tell you can teach down in this lecture 2 hours in the lecture hall, and it is very information and data heavy, and all of that is very important. But sometimes when I try to get them to be beyond and get to story and get to all of those other kinds of things, sometimes there's a bit of a block. And, we'll have like slides that have all this stuff on it. And I'm just like, yeah, but we can go beyond that because you really want to connect. And so I would say on the speaking tip, you can deliver any way that you feel your audience needs to get you. And that's where you can bring in all those elements of like culture. A lot of our cultures are oral traditions where we
Yes.
tell stories and we connect in multi-dynamic ways. And there's no reason that you can't bring those parts of you into the higher education classroom or beyond in the careers that you choose. And so that's a very important piece about that. And so start to think about how, because I think you'll have more impact when you hone and find your style. And this is the time to do it early on so that you don't get trapped in those patterns. And then I think for the next piece is just really thinking beyond about like, what do you want your impact to be beyond this degree title, this career title of like, are you thinking long term? Are you thinking, it doesn't have to be that, but are you thinking platform beyond? Are you thinking all these books? Are you thinking these kinds of things? Well, speaking is a clear part of that. And it's not lecturing, it's being that, knowing your story and being that ambassador for your work and your mission. And so how are you going to cultivate that now? And what are the steps that you're going to do? Like, how are you going to start messaging and speaking in that way? And so instead of thinking you have to be all the way done with your work, you can start now of like, you can start speaking to your work now, and you can start making those connections, and you can start to adjust how you deliver your messages and what presentations you choose if you're minded in the future instead of just what's in front of you. And I know it's hard because grad school can just suck you in, and you're like in the grad school dungeon and you come out, but you're only there for a short period of time. Think long term.
You are preaching to the choir, because I work
I'm
with
sure.
a lot of women of color, grad students, postdocs, academics as well. And I've noticed, especially my first gen clients and even first gen Latinas that I work with, where it's happened multiple times. They're telling me, I want my work to sound more academic. And I'm like, wait, what? What are you talking about?
I'm aggressively shaking my head no for those
Actually,
definitely
and so the work we do is not about helping them to write in this jargony academic way. It's about helping them to own their way and their style of writing and speaking. And it's just so spot on when you said a lot of us come from cultures with traditions where oral what is it, like oral traditions are part of it's like in our DNA. And so it makes a lot of sense that you might write a certain way or you might speak a certain way, and there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, it makes the work that we do more accessible because it reaches bigger audiences, and it again ultimately helps you to develop that platform that's bigger than just your current role and title. And that hopefully, this is a nod to Cynthia Pong, will provide us with the career insurance so that, hey, if the academic track won't work out, which it might not, you have all these other options. So I just want to say that I'm glad that you mentioned it, because it's so true and it's going to resonate with a lot of folks of, you don't have to be any other way. You can carve out a space for yourself, and you can also remind yourself that you have options if all else fails. And that's what I remind myself all the time too, because it's hard times right now. And a lot of folks they're not thinking about, let me work on my communication skills. They're thinking about, what can I do right now to survive? And this is the reframe of like, now is the time to work on what are the things that make you you, so that you understand where that can take you. And public speaking is one piece of that. We can all benefit from it. So thank you for that. Any final words of advice or any last insights you want to share for anyone else who's interested in improving their communication skills more broadly?
Yeah, I appreciate what you just said. And I think like communication is the key to so much. Being a good communicator, being a good public speaker, and leveraging that can get you beyond so many uncertain times and so much challenge. If you're able to do that, you can do anything. And you don't have to have everything right, and you don't have to have everything set. But there are so many ways that you can create opportunity for yourself by being a good communicator. So invest in that skill, invest in your growth as you are learning all these things, as you are researching, as you are trying to develop your career. And trust me, it will never let you down. It will never let you down.
All right, Rhonda. So how can folks connect with you, learn more about you and your work, support what you do?
Yes. Well, my company is Simply Speech Solutions. I like alliteration, but it's sometimes not easy to say. You can find me, Google that. I'm on LinkedIn at Rhonda Kahn. I'm also on Instagram at the Rhonda Kahn, but I don't post there too much these days because But please, LinkedIn is the best platform to reach me, and you can always email me. I have solo clients, I have programs and different things, and I'd love to hear if you need my support. And if not, you can just join me and engage with my content and be a part of my community.
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to make sure to include those links in the show notes to make it easy for folks to connect with you and even work with you. I'm so excited that you came today. I really appreciate you for sharing space with us today and for all the gems and words of wisdom that you shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, here are 3 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way is to get your copy of my free resource kit linked in my show notes. This kit includes tools, worksheets, and podcast playlists on all things grad school, productivity, and personal development. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle at Grad School Femtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.